It's vegan recipes with Pat and Emily.
Welcome to my kitchen. I'm so glad you stopped in tonight. I'm going to be making strudel, and it's a recipe that my grandmother taught my mother how to make, and she taught me how to make it. We used to make this dough and stretch it out over the table, but now you can buy phyllo dough, which really speeds up the process. It's very simple, it's very quick and easy, and the next thing that we're going to do is peel my apples. This is my apple peeler. This particular version of it has a suction cup. I do have a version that when I'm really doing a large amount of apples, like a bushel of apples, I use one that you have to actually screw down to your countertop. But this works really great, and it's the quickest way. If you do not have one, you don't have to go buy one. You can easily just peel and slice up your apples. This is how this one works. You can see, and these are fun for kids to eat. We're going to first peel the apples and then we will go chop them up. It is a little bit hard to get that off, but you can see just putting that in the sink is great. For this particular recipe, I'm going to be using about 8 apples. That's going to end up being about 6 cups of chopped apples for this size apple. And really, you can leave some of the skin on. You won't even be able to tell. You push this lever back, this peels it, and this part cores it. So I hope you think that's pretty cool. These are not very expensive. I think that I spent about $20 on mine. You can get them at Agway, you can get them at Bed Bath & Beyond. There's a number of places that you can get them. So you see the picture of how we peel the apples and core them. In a minute, I'm going to come back and I'll show you how I chop them and prepare them for strudel filling. Got my apples, and this is how I slice them. I want them to be fairly small. So I'm trying to hold this whole apple together, but usually it falls apart. As you can see, I've got a little bit of apple peel there. That's fine, that's actually good for you. And this particular apple, I'm not holding together. All right, I've got 6 full cups of apples, and to it, I'm adding about a half a cup of sugar. I am using a vegan sugar. We'll be sprinkling the cinnamon on, but it's probably going to amount to about a tablespoon. This is not a recipe that you have to measure extremely carefully. And you can taste your apples. If you've got some really hard apples that you're working with, you're going to want to add a little more sugar. And when you mix up the apples right now with the sugar, this gives you a great time to test it and see, are these sweet enough? So that's what I'm going to do right now. Those are sweet enough. They're ready to go. Now I'm going to open up my phyllo dough. I'm using one of those flour sacks. And when you get it, it comes with 2 rows, 2 packs of dough. Make sure that you've preheated your oven to 375 right now, and get a cookie sheet ready and put a baking mat on it, or you can use parchment paper if you would like. You have to be very careful with this dough, and I'm going to hope that it doesn't tear. You have to thaw it enough and unroll it very carefully. We're going to try to avoid it tearing. So it's folded in half. This you do find in your freezer section. Okay, this looks pretty good. And for each strudel, we're going to be using 5 pieces of phyllo dough. And you can see how it's very delicate and it tears a little bit. The phyllo dough dries out very quickly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull off my first sheet, and as you can see, it's already torn. I want to work with 5 sheets. Ideally, I'll be able to do that Show you this dough, even though I just bought it and it's fresh, it's splitting apart a little. So I'm just going to use, I have almost 2 pieces stuck together there. I'm using some vegan butter. You could just use oil. And it's really important to put some butter on here. This is way decreased from the original recipe. The reason that you're adding margarine at this point, not butter, excuse me for that, is it will help keep it moist and it will help it get crisp. That's 2 phyllo doughs, and then you're going to take and sprinkle plain vegan breadcrumbs over this. And the reason that you're doing that is to absorb the liquid from the apples and also to help keep the phyllo dough sheet separated. And really, it dries out so fast. I'm going to put this towel on it. It's moist. The towel's moist. So we've got 3 sheets down. We want 5. Hopefully I can get 5 single sheets. Again, there's the margarine, or you could use oil, like I said. Put a couple breadcrumbs. You can see you're not putting too many. Great, that one worked well. I'm going to try to get another one up. And you should see this dough when you make it from scratch and you're pulling it over a table to get it this thin. It's quite the challenge. I remember when my grandmother would make it, she would end up getting holes in it, and what she would do was take some that was hanging over the side of the table and patch up those holes. Just like she used to patch up clothing and men's socks and stuff, she would put a patch on it. Now you might think this looks like a lot of margarine. It's actually not. I've melted more than what I need. So this is going to be our last sheet for now. Look how nice that came off. I'm really excited about that. Then I'm covering it back up to keep it moist. I have tried making it without using any margarine or oil. It's okay, but really this tiny bit, if you're not eating a whole lot of oil in your diet, it's worth the addition. I wouldn't recommend seasoned breadcrumbs here, of course. When I put the recipe below, keep in mind it's just approximates because this is going to vary based on the apples that you're using. You can use Granny Smith, you can use Macintosh, you can use Yellow Delicious. So right now, I'm getting ready to put these apples on. And you want this pretty thick. Traditional strudel, you would be putting a layer down, spreading apples over it. But I found in this case, when you're using this phyllo dough, this is a better way to go. I'm actually going to move these back a little bit. You'll see why in a minute. And I really want to try to get these ends full of apples. Okay, I'm getting ready to roll it up. This is a really delicate process because you're trying to keep those apples all together, and it sometimes gets kind of messy. And I want to roll it in this direction, even though I could roll it in the other direction and it might stay together better. I want this full of apples. Okay, you see how it worked out. It looks pretty good. I'm happy with that. This is another really tricky part. I'm going to try to transfer this over to my cooking sheet, and you can see how very careful I'm being. I'm going to re-tuck this underneath there. You can do the same. I'm going to grab these apples that fell out and put them in. Really, if you don't get all the apples in it, you can just eat them. They're delicious. Now, the last step before we bake it is we do moisten the top with either the margarine or with oil. This is a messy dessert. You'll see when we're eating it, it's gonna be messy. Okay, I'm looking for my little knife. There it is. This I found is really a big bonus. Slice down almost to the bottom. And the reason that I'm doing this is that when I go to slice it after it's baked, this is all so crispy that it can just completely fall apart. So you can see I'm being really careful with it. This is one of those desserts that's really going to wow anybody that you serve it to. I will be back. I'm going to make one more and show you how we bake them. Strudels are ready to put in the oven. They're going to go in at 375. Check them at about 20 minutes. If you see the top needs a little more margarine, go ahead and brush a little bit on it. I would say these are going to bake at least 30 minutes, but do check them at about 20. You'll know they're finished when you stick a knife in them and the apples are soft. So while those are baking, I'm going to put away my phyllo dough. I'm not planning to use the rest of it right now, so I'm bringing the plastic back. I'm just rolling it back up, and you can refreeze it. There you go. And as you keep using this, you'll find some of the sheets of phyllo stick together, but you can just use them as they are. Hold the strudel out of the oven. I want you to see when you stick a knife in it, you want the apples to be soft. And you can see here they started to form a sauce and thicken. That's what you want. When you've cooked it on a silicone sheet, let it cool there for 2 or 3 minutes. And because strudel is supposed to be crispy, you're going to put it on a cooling rack. I'm just loosening it. Looks like it might break apart for me, which that's okay. Yep, that's why we have those slices in there. So I'm going to move it over here. I'm going to move this one over. Looks like this one wants to break in half as well. Look how nice and flaky it is. At this point, you're going to take your knife and cut all the way through each piece. And you can see if you were trying to cut through this without those slits already in there, you would end up with all this mess. Can you hear that crunch? And then you can just sprinkle it with some powdered sugar. I think this is best served hot. I'm going to just sprinkle this one and cut it apart a little bit later. And you can see I'm able to lift it up. If I'm going to serve it immediately, I can put it on the plate. If I'm not serving it immediately, I'm going to leave it on the cooling rack. When you go to reheat strudel, the best way to reheat it is to put it in a skillet. Here we go, we've got a little plate. You can see how beautiful that looks. Do I wait for company? I don't think so. Nice and flaky, so delicious. Come again, subscribe. Here comes the silly stuff. Are we still taping? Mm-hmm.